Take two. Apple, if you're listening, you're fired. We're going to Samsung. Take two of the podcast. We delivered some gold last time, so hopefully we can repeat the dose. I mean, the answers are the same.
I'm upset about it.
But maybe we miss some of the classic banter between that people love to hear. But anyway, we've got some questions for you guys today that were asked via email, socials, people messages. Oh, I love the podcast. It's all I can listen to. Here's a question. I'm like, oh, no worries. We'll get to it if we can. We've got hundreds, but we've been able to whittle it down to about 5 or 6.
And I've been in charge of actually saying the questions today, and I did such a stellar job.
Such a stellar job, and then a garage band decided to crap itself, and we're down. So we're back. We've swapped computers. I lost faith in my one, so we swapped to Dan's, which is more reliable. Might be a bit of a metaphor. But anyway.
All right, question number 1.
Yes, get into it.
Eating the same amount, calories or volume. Is it more beneficial to have 3 bigger meals or 5 to 6 smaller meals, or does it not matter much? Go.
Short answer, it doesn't matter much. Long answer, it doesn't matter that much. It's one of those things where it's first and foremost personal preference, and that's really what you should keep in mind, like what works for me. The science behind it and all that stuff doesn't mean anything if you can't adhere to it long term. So I would say that first, figure out what you prefer. If you prefer more frequent, smaller meals, roll with that. Optimize that as best you can. If you prefer, like we do, larger meals but less of them, I think it's more time efficient. It's easier to prepare. You're not lugging around food all the time. That's our argument anyway. Then roll with that. But it really does depend on you, the person. What the science would say is that as long as your calories and your protein are in check to a certain degree, and I'll explain why to a certain degree in a minute, then it doesn't matter. It's much of a muchness. So first things first, focus on your total intake and your protein, and then you know if you feel like you've got room to move there, or if your goal's quite specifically like muscle gain, then you can start to optimize based on that. But for most of our guys, it is purely about just being healthy and well. So total intake and protein, worry about the rest after that. For the muscle gain, there is some science that suggests that regular protein feedings is more beneficial. And it doesn't actually really suggest that, it proves that. So if you do have muscle gain as a goal, you'd probably interested in eating some more regular meals, but that's purely for like athletes and bodybuilders. When you hear like, oh, my PT told me to eat like 6 times a day, like, well, yeah, I mean, that might have been the science at the time, but it's not anymore. So don't worry about it. And who wants to be carrying around a lunchbox? Not me.
Well, not only... Yeah, like, can you do it?
Yeah, who's it practical for?
Yeah.
Not us.
Yeah, it really does. It really does depend on you. So obviously, what most people struggle with is their overall volume anyway. So like the average person just looking to be a little bit healthier, they struggle with just eating maybe not the best food and too much of it.
Yep.
So if we can just focus on getting that in check, so the volume first, and then obviously the quality of your food, and that including exactly what you said, Ben, the protein is probably the most important and most lacking in most people, then you're pretty right. Then it comes down to you. So what do you do? You know, what do you do for work? Are you on your feet all day? Do you have access to a fridge? Are you out on the road? Are you a tradie? Like, do you need to pack a lunchbox? Like, what's the go?
If you have smoko every half an hour like a council worker or a tradie, then you might be able to do that. But for, you know, if we've got PTs all day, we can't just be like, hold up, guys, 20 minutes, I've got to get my food in, because it's more optimal. It's just not going to work.
Yeah. So for us, we do find that 3 larger meals work better for us. And I just prefer that, to be honest.
Yeah.
I find that if I have smaller meals, I tend to want to eat more. And we have noticed that with most people as well. Once you do get the right balance in your meal, then we notice people are snacking less. So do you actually need it, or is it just a bit of a habit?
Yeah.
That's probably more the question when it comes down to the multiple meals a day, because that's been probably one of the biggest takeaways with most of our guys, hasn't it?
On the nutrition program.
Yeah, we never tell people to stop snacking, but it stops.
They feel like they don't need it.
Yeah, it stops happening once we get
more adequate meals.
More adequate meals under their belt, yeah.
It's also, like, I guess, when we kind of get into the minutia, I guess you could call this, of like healthy eating and nutrition, it's like you sort of need to just stop yourself and be like, does this actually matter for me? Like, is this something that I need to be worried about at this stage, or are there more basic aspects to nutrition that I should probably be focusing on? And the answer 10 times out of 10 will probably be that it's not something you necessarily need to worry about.
I was about to say, I don't think there's one client in here that really needs to overly worry about the amount of meals they eat.
No. And it's honestly, like, for what most people want to achieve, like 99% of the population, it's something that you'd never need to worry about.
Yeah.
So
it's only something I'd focus on if I was looking to go into competition or something like that.
Is that a precursor for post-pregnancy? Diet starts Monday for Danielle.
So.
Maybe when we're shredding for the wedding, we'll start this little smaller feedings. But actually, that is a good thing to touch on now. So one of the biggest kind of reasons that people think smaller, more frequent meals is better is because of it fires up your metabolism, which we know is BS. It absolutely does not. One of the biggest myths, along with actually a myth we were talking about before, that curls do not in fact get the girls. Not head curls, bicep curls.
All right, man.
But not true. So if you think that eating more frequent meals will help, speed up your fat loss results, it won't. So that's something we can take off the table.
It comes down to you and what you prefer. There are little things you can do. Like we were talking about our brunch on the weekend. We had a staff meeting and we went out for brunch. So we walked to brunch and home. And I said to Ben on the way home, I feel so much better going for a walk after I eat.
Yep.
And I often say as well, like, I was always brought up to eat at the table. Like, we never ate on the couch or we never ate late and went to bed. Like, we always stayed upright.
Yep.
For a certain period of time before we went to bed. Whereas, obviously, that kind of stuff aids your digestion. So, walking, being upright, like not laying down. So, for example, shift workers that eat and go to bed sometimes find they feel a little bit like a bit sluggish.
I think anyone would be able to relate to a time where they've eaten too much and then gone to bed and just lying there like feeling terrible.
Yeah. So all that little stuff is icing on the cake. Like, 5 meals instead of 3. Like that. It's all little things that no one needs to stress about.
Cart before the horse sort of stuff. Yeah.
Exactly. Like, that makes me feel good, so I do it. So trust how you're feeling.
Yeah.
Like, do you feel better having 3 big meals or do you feel better having 5?
Just on that, like, you've sort of touched on the topic, I guess, of self-experimentation. If you want to give yourself, like, actual, how does this make me feel? Be consistent for 2 or 3 weeks. Don't do it for one day and be like, I was more tired. It's like, well, that could have been anything. Like, you really need to see if something's working for you. Like, you need to kind of just head first straight into it.
Yeah.
Because,
definitely.
Yeah, and if it's not working for you, it may not even be a health thing, it's a lifestyle thing, and they're both as important as the other in regards to, like, long-term sustainability. Last point on this is that there's a lot of studies and science to suggest that eating less meals helps with your digestion as well, which I guess logically makes sense, that it would give your, stomach and everything a bit of a breather. Yeah. So not just sleep as the only break, but if you eating with 4 to 5 hours in between, it gives your body enough of a chance to kind of just settle down and come back to baseline before you feed it again.
Thank you, Ben.
Next question.
Number 2, your ideas on the top most beneficial fitness areas to work on or build up to if planning a pregnancy.
Okay, so pregnancy pre-season. This basically speaks to getting yourself in as healthy an internal environment as possible. So less about the external. Like, it's not a time where, and this really depends on the person as well, but we're keeping health at front of mind, especially for ladies, as front of mind as possible. So that means that before you, I guess, undertake a new program or a new nutrition protocol or anything that you're thinking of introducing, like, just ask yourself, like, is this healthy? So probably doing HIIT training 4 to 5 times a week, we might think against it. Sorry to the HIIT fans, but it's just like, it basically comes down to your hormones and managing stress, really. When we are too stressed, we're it's not a really
it's not an optimal state to be in.
No, it's not. Yeah, it's not. You're not going to be at your most fertile, which basically is your body's signal that, like, you're comfortable, you're well. So keep that front of mind. In regards to fitness and strength, you're the expert here, Dan. Like, what's something that you should be doing to kind of help either get yourself ready or even to kind of prepare you for post?
Yeah, sure. So the first thing I'd say is, don't worry about what anyone else is doing.
Yes.
Don't worry what anyone else did when they were pregnant. Don't worry what they were capable of when they were pregnant. How are you going to be? So, for example, have you never exercised in your life? You're planning to get pregnant, but you just want to be a little bit fitter and healthier, and you feel like that would help you. And sure, it would.
It definitely would.
So, but what you don't want to do is go from doing nothing to
all the things.
Yeah, to absolutely everything you see on Instagram. Okay, so you might start with, okay, I'm doing nothing, I'm a couch potato. I want to start going for a 30-minute walk 3 times a week.
Yeah.
Perfect improvement.
Which comes back to the stress argument as well. Is like, if you were to go from 0 to 100, that would put your body in probably like overload. Stress management, it's not like health-wise in the long term, yeah, joining a gym's great. In regards to being more fertile, probably not initially, at least anyway. Like, it might take you some time to actually adapt to that, which might not be what you exactly want at this stage.
Yeah, well, maybe after you've gotten your 3 walks a week and you're feeling great and you feel like you could add something extra, then maybe
a strength session. Try a personal training session if you've never been into a gym before.
Yep. Having a coach would really help. If you're someone that's reasonably well trained.
Yep.
So, for example, this person I know
3 times a week, consistently,
a pretty consistent trainer.
A year, 2 years.
Yeah. Yep. So keep doing what you're doing. Like, can you add an extra session? Will that benefit you, or will that make you feel worse? Will that make you feel more overwhelmed, or will that make you feel better?
Yeah.
Like, it really is what's just going to work for you to optimize your health.
Yep.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So obviously we're looking just for a little bit of improvement, because you want to be able to maintain whatever you're doing while you are pregnant. And when I say maintain, I don't mean like you should be lifting the same weights or, but you should be able to maintain a reasonable level of consistency.
Yep.
If you are well.
Yes.
Okay. So you don't want to go all out and then fall pregnant and do nothing.
Yeah.
Okay. Unless your health calls for that.
Yep.
To be done. And in saying that, like, I've had 3 pregnancies now and they've all been very, very different.
Yep.
Okay. So not having expectations in your head about how it should go. So we've got our pre, we've got while we're pregnant, and then post. And one thing I can definitely say 100% is true is the fitter you are, the easier your recovery is. My recovery with Mia was so much easier than it was for William.
Yeah.
And I'd say I've always been reasonably fit and healthy. It's not like I went from one extreme to the other.
It was a different type of training that you were doing.
Yeah. So we do want to be like in a reasonable position, I guess, to be able to execute everything it is that we want to do after we have our baby as well.
Yeah.
So again, not rushing to get back into anything, but I just want to be able to look after my baby and go for a walk.
Yep.
So, yeah, just not having crazy wild expectations and getting carried away with what you see on the gram, I'd say, is the most important thing.
Or with people you've trained with as well. You know, we've got a vast array of mums who train with us, and they've all had a different experience. You know, some people have come back no problem. Other people have come back via personal training. We've had cesareans, natural births, but if done properly over the course of 12 months, it all kind of evens out. So, yeah, it's a completely unique experience, as you said, and it just needs to be taken one step at a time. Just try not to get ahead of yourself.
I agree. This is kind of our next question is continuing on from that. So it's asking for technique or form to be aware of if you need to train running while pushing a pram. So we often can't use our arms, and how do you compensate or maintain form in a safe way that doesn't hurt your back or other bits? What would be the best height or position for the handle for ergonomics?
Let's start with the height of the handles. Is you want something that would allow you to be in a good posture. So a good, strong, upright position where your traps aren't around your ears, and you can just keep a nice high chest and maintain your breathing.
Yeah, so think about your torso position of running normally.
Yeah.
You need your hands at a level that you can maintain a good torso position.
The other part of this question that I want to get into is to be aware of if you need to train running while pushing a pram. Do you need to train running whilst pushing a pram? Ideally, probably not. It's not something that especially because, if we think about our kids in prams, they're 0, 1, 2 years old max. It's going to be a pretty, running at the best of times is pretty rough on your body. Especially as an adult, if you haven't done it in a while, it can take its toll. Sore joints, sore lower backs. It's something that needs to be gradually introduced. We're not 30 kilo 10-year-olds anymore, and you're just like an elastic band. You can rebound from anything. But as a full-grown adult who hasn't probably done much running in the past, it takes a toll on how you can come back or feel good. It all depends on where you're currently at,
and that's not even taking into account the extra consideration after having a baby. So you've got a compromised pelvic floor, and also your abdominal. A lot of people have abdominal separation, which then
puts a lot of pressure on your lower back.
Pressure on your back. We've had so many people come back and have chronic back issues, just wanting to go a little bit too hard too early. So yeah, all that needs to be taken into consideration.
Yep.
Is the run actually worth that?
Yep.
Or can you go for a run when your partner gets home for 20 minutes? Go down to the oval. On the grass, build up.
Yeah. With some nice intervals, 100 meters on, 100 meters off, or a minute on, a minute off. That would be ideal to get back into strength training, but it's also one of those things where it's probably not going to be practical to push a pram on the grass. So there's certain sacrifices that probably need to be made there. But I think all things being considered, it's just not something that we would be looking to introduce unless we had a really strong background in it.
Yeah, I would agree. I've never, with any of my children, I haven't really had an urge to want to push them in a pram, to run with them, I guess. I've always,
it's a nightmare.
If I did want to go for a run, I'd prefer to go for a run and kind of zone out by myself.
Yeah.
Rather than, be pushing a pram at
I
that
would
time.
say that we're both pretty comfortable runners. Running with the pram is way harder. So if it's harder for us, and I did the Mother's Day Classic, the 4K, it was hard with the pram. Imagine how much harder it would have been if if I'm recovering from childbirth.
Yeah.
Brutal. I probably would hurt myself.
Yeah.
Anyway, our recommendation would be err on the side of not doing it, but if you have to, just be really, really careful.
Yeah, agree. And the next question for the day is how to eat healthy and veggie.
Well, first things first. It's entirely possible. It's just not as easy. So anytime you take away, I guess, a significant food group like meat for a vegetarian, it just becomes a little bit more challenging to make sure that you're not missing out on any like vital nutrients or macronutrients. I mean, like vitamins and everything like that. So basically, the chat with vegos and vegans sort of always comes back down to protein. Like that's always the topic of discussion is can I get enough protein cutting meat or animal products out of my diet? The answer is yes, but it's just harder. It just means that you'll be eating a lot more of the same stuff, which is fine because most of us tend to eat the same, 5 or 6 meals pretty much on rotation anyway. But it certainly does limit your options and it probably makes your nutrition potentially a little bit more boring as well. Yeah, but I'm sure there are vegetarians listening to this being like, "Oh,
How dare you,
how dare
Benjamin?
you?" But that's just
That's
my opinion as well. Like, I
yeah,
don't love vegetarian foods. Like, I'd get
yeah.
pretty bored pretty quickly. But
But
health-wise, it's definitely doable. But just be under no illusions that it's a lot more difficult. That's all.
yeah, I think because you're not very experimental with foods,
No, I'm
and
pretty military.
like for example, when you have your veggies, they're either roasted or steamed, or like you don't do much with them.
No, not a whole lot of sautéing or
Yeah, flavors. You just
just eat
you
it.
eat your veggies because you know you have to,
Yep,
and that's okay.
that's fine.
Whereas vegetarians tend to be a little bit more creative, which makes their meals delicious, which
For sure.
I love.
And I also don't love a lot of staples in a good vegetarian diet, either like stews, soups, that sort of stuff doesn't really tickle my fancy.
Yeah.
So I typically avoid it anyway. So anyway, this is not about me and how I feel about the vegetarian diet. It's about just knowing that you are going to struggle to get the right amount of protein in. You were making a really good point about food volume and like the amount of protein in vegetarian options not necessarily being as efficient as animal options.
Yeah, definitely not. So protein's probably the biggest thing we see with our clients that are on vegetarian diets, that they struggle a lot more. So you need to have a lot more in terms of volume than of tofu, let's say, compared to the equivalent amount of meat.
Yep.
You just don't get as much bang for your buck. So the vegetarian options that contain protein contain less protein.
Yes, and they also contain carbs as well, which means you have to be mindful of your overall energy intake so that to hit the amount of protein that you need to be healthy, fit, and strong, you're not blowing your total calories either. So there's just like, honestly, you just have to be a lot more dialed in than maybe normal people. Maybe the people on a normal diet would kind of have to, which which it can be harder. It can be an added stress, or if you're really into it, like it can be, interesting and something that you monitor as well.
Yeah, sometimes people really enjoy that side of it.
Or they enjoy the challenge, and they like watching the changes on their body. But I mean, we've heard different, like anecdotal takes on, I feel great, I feel sluggish. Like it really depends on the person. Like it is possible to eat healthily on a vegetarian or a vegan diet, but like how are you going to feel? Like how are you responding? Just because you read an article where Karen's said she feels amazing doesn't mean that you're going to. So you need to pay attention to that as well. Like don't just follow the plan because it's supposed to be good.
Yeah.
You follow the plan because it's making you feel good.
Yeah, and one thing also I think worth mentioning is if you are following a certain diet for ethical reasons, you do not want your health to suffer. So just making sure that you dot all your I's and cross your T's, like get your bloods done.
Yeah.
Like you don't want to be iron deficient because then that causes other issues.
Oh yeah.
Iron's huge for so many vegetarians, and the protein as well. Like supplement if you need to. If you can't get
You
enough,
probably will need to.
yeah, through your food, like
Yep.
take a powder. Like
Yep.
the protein requirement your body needs to be fulfilled.
Yep.
No matter what diet you're on.
No matter what diet.
Yeah. Okay, and final one for the day. I'm finding when I actually get it together and go for a run, I'm having a lot of muscle fatigue from the strength training.
So I guess how to work through that and not be as tired.
I'm assuming that would be the question.
Yeah. So pretty much you just have to kind of think of it like this. When you started at the gym, you were sore. Like your legs hurt, arms hurt, like everything was sore for probably 2-3 weeks, maybe. And then you start to get into the groove and it feels okay again, as long as you're consistent. Like the more you do it, the faster your response to it is. Same with the running. So like that's your new baseline is I train 3 times a week, and now I'm adding runs on top of that. Like there might be a little period of adjustment there where it's like your energy expenditure's gone way up and your body needs time to adapt. A couple of other considerations is your recovery, and that would be like your sleep and nutrition. So you've added in something into your week that is a significant energy like out. You need to make sure that you're like allowing for that with your nutrition. Like, are you having extra protein, extra carbs on that day? Like, are you making sure that you're giving your body the resources that it needs to recover? Because I think a lot of times we just don't change that, and then we're like, God, I'm flat all the time, or I'm tired, I'm sore. Like, you need to make sure that your energy in is matching your energy out.
Yeah, it needs to complement what you're doing. That's why we often say, like when we see couples who always eat the same, pack the same lunch, have the same dinner, have the same portion sizes. It's like,
Oh, that's a
but
topic
one's
for
a
next
tradie
week.
and one sits at a desk for 8 hours. It's like that is a huge difference in
Even
your
people who
energy
live
out.
together. So, like we've got nutrition clients at the moment who live together but drastically different lifestyles. And,
Yeah.
The challenges with them that they need to know that they can't eat the same.
Yeah, you don't serve up the same plate for the two people.
100%. So just be aware of that. I would say to give it some time. If you're still, 6 weeks in and you're like, God, this is not any easier, then you probably would need to look at potentially lessening the intensity of your strength sessions, and making sure that you've got some energy left over for those runs, but also understanding the context of like the actual sessions. Like, are you running on top of the strength sessions for general well-being, or are you running on top of the strength sessions because you have a 10K, half marathon, whatever it is in mind that you're training for? Like, what's most important at this stage?
I was about to say that context. So the context of the run. So this person, please chat to us. What's the purpose of your run? Like, are you adding it in to, complement the training you're doing here?
Which it definitely will.
So on top of your 3 sessions, you could be using it as a recovery run.
Yeah.
Or when you're running, are you thinking about your times? Are you thinking about your pace? Are you thinking about your distance? Do you still have a run goal? Because that's very different. Because if you're using it as a recovery session from this and to complement what you do here, you probably don't want to be really worried about your times and that kind of thing. Whereas if you do have a specific goal for the run, then that's obviously very different, and maybe you need to adapt what you do here.
Yeah, always.
So yeah, it really does matter why.
Yeah, but as it sits right now, I would just try and eat a little bit more on the days that you're running. That would be the go-to. Just up your protein and carbohydrate intake on the days you run, and then see how you feel after that. Just make sure that you're giving your body what it needs to effectively deal with the extra energy expenditure.
Also, if you're really sore from the session, so if you did a session on Wednesday, let's say, and you're really sore on Thursday, maybe don't go for a run Thursday. Maybe go for a run Saturday instead.
Yeah, and again, that completely depends on like scheduling and everything. If that's the only time you can do it, it's the only time you can do it. But if you've got a little bit more flexibility there, use it for sure. Is that it for our questions?
Yeah, that's the wrap.
All right. So, I'm not sure. Oh, we might do a podcast next week. We'll see how you're feeling.
Jeez, hard.
Well, I thought you might want a little, half an hour just to touch base with the millions.
Goodness me.
All right. Well, if you have any questions or any topics that you'd like us to discuss, just always flick them through. I keep a notepad, so hopefully we don't miss any of them. Hope you enjoy the episode, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye.